Hello.
Hello.
It's the
And
Halloween episode.
it's the Halloween episode. And we got treats. We got tricks and we got treats.
We got tricks
Just for
and we
y'all.
got treats. Welcome to book club.
Welcome to book club. This month for Halloween, we got a double feature. We're doing 2 books. Not one, but 2. And the books we have chosen for this lovely double feature are Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca and Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica. Infamous books, especially on TikTok.
Yeah.
for their disturbing content, all that jazz. And so we decided, why not get a little freaky, get a little crazy for Halloween. And so that's exactly what we did. So, which one would you like to start with first? The shorter of the 2, the longer, the bigger?
Probably
Which
the
one?
shorter one. Both of these contain a lot of body horror-esque type things.
Mm-hmm.
The first one, Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, has a lot more psychological aspect to it. So if those are things that bother you, maybe don't watch this episode. Tender is the Flesh has a lot of dehumanization and dubious consent and more
Mm-hmm.
body horror. So again, that's not your thing. Maybe skip this one.
Also, both of these books do have some violence against animals. So
Yes.
if that's not your thing either, you can skip. You can dip on out.
Yeah.
All that good stuff. But yes, check trigger warnings for these 2 books just to be
Yeah.
sure. When I say there's some disturbing content in here, we mean it. Beware. But both of these books are short. They're shorter books.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably 2 of the shortest we've done so far.
Yes.
I think Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke is under 130 pages. It's a little novella more than anything. You can be done with it in an hour. That's how itty bitty this thing is.
Yes.
Meanwhile, Tender is the Flesh is clocking in at about a little over nearly 220.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really itty bitty book.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them you can get through pretty quick.
Yes.
You might need to take pauses though. You might gotta take breaks. But if you can power through with no breaks, you can get through these really, really fast.
Yes.
So, but we'll start with the shorter, the little novella. Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke.
So I will read the description on the back of the book for this one, and then when we get to the second one, you can read the description for that one.
All right.
So for Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, a whirlpool of darkness churns at the heart of a macabre ballet between 2 lonely young women in an internet chat room in the early 2000s. A darkness that threatens to forever transform them once they finally succumb to their most horrific desires. I feel like with this episode, we should just kind of skip straight to the spoiler part because there's not a whole lot for us to go off of otherwise. So we will be talking spoilers pretty much this whole episode. So if you want to read the book first, now would be your time to do that. So this book, what I think is interesting is it starts with a fake author's note, basically saying that whoever compiled this information, that basically this is a compilation of this information that someone else gathered, regarding the untimely demise of Agnes Petrella at the age of 24. The author of this text has tenderly and judiciously compiled the following content with the hope of enlightening the public by publishing the contents of her correspondence with Zoe Cross in the several months prior to her death. And then goes on to say, because the litigation surrounding Zoe Cross's case remains open, certain elements have been redacted or censored at the behest of Henley's Edge Police Department. So off the bat, we know that one of them is dead, and the other one
Yes.
is in court, presumably for the death of the prior mentioned character. So this author's note also says that the author remains a nonpartisan entity and instead patiently waits for the balances of justice to tip in favor of the truth. So that's already the setup of this book.
Yeah.
And it only gets worse from there.
It gets worse.
It gets worse. So basically this starts out with a post that Agnes wrote on a queer community board online. The title of the post is Antique Apple Peeler with Vibrant History for Sale. Asking price $250, will settle for $220. And the date of this post is May 26th of the year 2000. So
this is early 2000s
yes.
internet. This book is written through like chat logs and like emails between Agnes and Zoe. So it's an interesting way to tell this story. Um, funky times.
Yes, and there's
Funky
like
times are ahead.
there's literally no other like there's I think two places where the quote unquote author inserts information, and it's at the beginning of this post, which is just saying that this post was made on queerlist.org, and that the administrator Sig Thornton recovered the post. And then I think there's one other place where they talk about like the they say something about like the email correspondence, and I think at one point they thank the police department. But other than that, there's no other like additional information aside from their emails back and forth and their chat logs. So everything else you kind of have to piece together, as far as like what might else have been happening. And I think that's a really interesting way of writing this because it leaves so much up to the imagination. There are like the horrendous things that happen in the story, but there's also like the consideration of what was happening outside of the story and why why things happen the way they did. Also interesting to note at the beginning, just like from the get, is that this everything takes place from May 26th to August 21st. So, what, May 4 months?
Good God.
All of this happens over the course of 4 months.
Jesus Christ.
So, for reference as we go through this, yeah, this all happens very quickly and without really any like hesitancy.
There's no room for break, no room for pause.
No room for pause. So it starts with she's selling this apple peeler. She tells this story about how it belonged to like a great grandmother or something. And there's a whole story about how she got the apple peeler. And what I think is interesting is that the way that the grandmother in the story got the apple peeler was that the husband didn't want to buy it for her, and so she put a needle in an apple and he ate it and messed up his mouth, and he then bought her the apple peeler. So I think that's an interesting way to start the story given where it goes, that it starts with this weird interaction between these two people, which we don't even know if that interaction is true. She even states that in the post, that she's like, yeah, my grandmother was prone to making up stories, so I don't know if that's true for sure or not. So all this, she then gets an email from Zoe Cross, who is interested in buying the apple peeler, and tells a story about her own grandfather and that basically she wants it for her grandfather. Yeah. So they go back and forth about that for a minute. Agnes says that she's slightly hesitant to sell it because of how precious it has been to her. when Zoe responds, she's like, if you're hesitant to sell it, like I don't feel comfortable buying it, you know, just let me know. And Agnes responds again and like gives this story basically of how it's like one of the last things she has from her grandmother, and that when she came out as gay, her family didn't accept her, so like she doesn't really have a lot of stuff from her family. But that she does want to sell it because she needs like rent money, I think is what it was. So she gets another response from Zoe, who is like, I will give you your monthly rent payment and you keep the apple peeler. Which, like, from a stranger who you've sent like 3 emails back and forth with is crazy work, especially I feel like in that time period. To just like have someone be like, yeah, I'm just gonna wire transfer you your rent payment. Um is a little crazy.
It's immediate sugar mommy status for Miss Zoe. Immediately.
It does feel a little love bomby.
Like, girl, what are we doing?
What are
You
we
had just met this lady. Do
doing?
you know her last name? No.
Okay, so Agnes is basically like, I really can't say no because I need rent money. She says, like, I'm a bit hesitant to give my private information over, but I know you won't be able to rob me. Right, thank you for your kindness, it means so much to me. And at this point, Agnes signs off her email as your friend Agnes, whereas previous she's just been saying like best Agnes or something. So we get an email again from Agnes to Zoe where she's saying thank you and that Zoe wired $1,000 to her account. She's like, I don't know like how to thank you, like thank you so much, blah blah blah. And then Agnes sends another email basically saying she didn't know what she was gonna do. You've changed the life of someone who is seriously contemplating ending it all if things kept going the way they were, which I feel like that line in particular, it seems very innocuous, right? Because it's like, oh, she's like on the verge of homelessness and she, you know, this is a feeling that maybe makes sense to have. But given everything else that happens, I'm a little like, that's interesting. Thinking thoughts. Agnes or Zoe responds again and is like, yeah, like no problem, basically. Like, you're welcome. And then says that she'll be on instant messenger. So this is where we start getting chat logs. Agnes's username is Agnes in Wonderland 76. And Zoe's is Crushed Marigold. So they talk back and forth a little bit. They're basically like, you know, thank you for the money again. They kind of talk very briefly, and Zoe makes Agnes promise to keep the apple peeler. And then they you know, whatever, they leave. Agnes sends Zoe another email saying, let's see.
It's
Basically,
a lot of just like, you know, I hope this isn't weird, but I was thinking of you.
Yeah.
Wanted to send you a quick note that you've been on my mind all morning.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of talks about like another experience she had on the Queer List website where somebody reached out and inquired about the apple peeler. And she says, I thought I took the post down, but I guess it had completely slipped my mind. You know, she tells Zoe, you'll be happy to know I took the post down. The apple peeler is going to stay here and be safe with me, like I promised you. And then Zoe responds, she's at work. Mm-hmm. She's real swamped. I mean, girl, if you're wiring $1,000, I bet you're swamped at work. You're a high profile lady. And she's like, I can't talk tonight. I have plans, so I won't be online. But I can try to, slide in your messages at like 11 o'clock if you're still
Hmm.
up. And she says that she looks forward to it. You can really
Yeah.
see them starting to. Something is blooming of a sort. There's
Yes.
something there. Um,
This is like a week after the initial correspondence back and forth.
mhm. It is very helpful that there are dates on these things, so you can really like tell when everything is happening,
Hmm.
um, which
Like how
I
quickly
appreciate.
things are escalating.
Oh yeah, and then there's more instant messages between the two.
Well,
Um,
okay, so
you
in
know,
this first round of instant messages, first Zoe tells Agnes that she just broke up with someone. Um,
oh,
and is like, I didn't want to tell you. I thought it might spoil what we have. Um, and then Zoe talks about she's watching some travel program, and she says, "Did you know there's a place you can go to experience your own burial? It's like a ritualized form of pretend death. You write your own eulogy, you're attended by a crowd of mourners, then you're interred in the earth for 30 minutes before you're exhumed. They give you an oxygen tank just in case, but I can't imagine doing it. Me neither. My father used to have a saying when I was really little. At the end of the day, he used to ask me, 'What have you done to deserve your eyes?' It took me years to understand what he actually meant. Our eyesight, among other things, is a gift that we take for granted, right? I suppose I haven't given it much thought. Exactly. It's not something we always think about until we lose it. Um, what have you done today to deserve your eyes? You're asking me? You can't answer, can you? I'm going to hold you accountable from now on. That's Zoe to Agnes. Are you? I'm going to check in each day and make certain you've done at least one thing to deserve your eyes. I'm not kidding. I believe you. I'm going to ask you starting tomorrow. And how should I do that? So then they go back and forth about where she works, and Zoe tells Agnes to buy a bright red dress and bright red lipstick and to wear that into the office the next day, um, and asks for proof of like her taking a picture in like an employee bathroom, um, as like proof that she quote unquote deserves her eyes. And Agnes agrees. So then we get an email where Agnes basically details her experience of doing that, um, which is interesting. She, let's see. She describes a lot of it as like she uses a lot of like blood and like flesh and that kind of language when she's describing like the color of the dress and the color of the lipstick and all this stuff, which I think is interesting. That's how she's going to describe these things. Um, she goes to work. See, like even here, she says, "I suppose I was. The redness sprawling from every inch of my body as if I were blanketed with a rare tropical flower, a carnivorous plant with a decidedly avid appetite." And then
so much
basically,
blood.
yeah. Um, and then basically she gets like reprimanded at work and they send her home early.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is interesting.
Yeah, like, girl, it's a red dress. Why are you sending somebody home over a red dress? Come on. But like her boss says, we've had some complaints regarding your new attire. Some of the other employees have felt your colors are a bit distracting. We're going to ask you to take the rest of the day off. And then Agnes says, so I packed my things and I left the office for the day. When I walked, it felt as if a thick red weed sprouted from each of my footprints, a trail for anyone daring enough to follow. I think I've earned my eyes for another day, don't you? And it feels like at first she is very much, when first describing it, she talks about like it feels like she's very nervous, um but slowly you can see in the way she discusses like how she feels in the dress, she starts to feel like a little exhilarated. She's like, this is a very new experience for me and I don't really hate it that much. And Zoe replies, emails back, and says, I'm really delighted that you've reclaimed your power, and that you're making colossal strides towards the ownership of your true identity, a fearless young woman. Um, and it's a lot of Zoe praising her. And then Zoe says, I hope this isn't too forward, but then again, I feel as though we have no more boundaries between us. Y'all, it's been a week. Um, if you'd truly like to make a bold statement and embrace your new identity, go the rest of the week without wearing any underwear. Talk to you tonight, Zoe. It's like, girl, it's been a week. It's where are we going? Why are we escalating so fast? We went from 0 to 60, and we're about to go from 60 to 100 in 2 seconds. What are we doing? Where are we at? And then more chat logs. They are,
Going back and forth
Zoe
about the dress thing again.
Zoe says, how does the snake feel in her new skin? Which is a really interesting way of phrasing that. And, Zoe says we're all capable of change. Sometimes it hurts. The hints of what happens in this book are all over the damn place when you look back on it. Oof. And they're going back and forth. Zoe talks about, I wasn't joking about the underwear thing. And Agnes is like, I've been thinking about it. And then they start it seems like they're kind of flirting in their own odd way. Agnes says, do you like thinking about me not wearing any? Zoe says, it's a thought I don't mind. And Agnes asks, maybe you'd like to tell me what else is on your mind. Zoe says she can't. It would scare her.
Man.
Oy.
And then the brief wild escalation we hit where they start basically dirty talking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Zoe is doing most of it, and it's a little weird, and she refers to herself as mommy, and Agnes basically says that she's and then suddenly the messages stop. And again, Zoe is doing this whole, I don't want to scare you away. I don't want to tell you what I'm thinking. And she says, the problem is I know exactly what I want, and it's something no woman could ever give me. And she said, I could try. No, you've done so much for me. What is it? I can't tell you right. Or Zoe says, I can't talk right now. And then Agnes asks if someone is there with her. And Zoe says, no, I have to go. I'll talk to you later. I think it's interesting that Agnes asks again if someone is there, because in one of the earlier chats, the one where Zoe says that she just broke up with someone, Agnes asks if the girl that she broke up with is there with her. And Zoe says no. And then here again, we have Agnes asking if there's someone with her. And I don't know if maybe that's an early glimpse at some of the obsessiveness and how it manifests in both of them, or if it's an implication that Zoe is doing this behind someone's back. I don't know. Interesting.
Very interesting. And all of that conversation where they're dirty talking and getting freaky happens at about 10:40 at night. And then, the chats stop at about 10:41, and much, much later, same night, at about 1:39 in the morning, Zoe comes back onto the chat, and Agnes is there immediately and is really happy that Zoe's come back. And Zoe's like, have you been waiting this whole time? What are you doing, girl? But Agnes says, I couldn't sleep and I had hoped you'd come back. Why did you leave? And Zoe says, I was scared of losing you. And Agnes asks, why would you lose me? And Zoe said, because I thought about telling you what I really wanted. And Agnes is like, I want you to tell me. I need you to tell me. You could never scare me. And that's when Zoe admits, I want a woman to belong to me. And Agnes is like, oh yeah, I'm down. I'm down to clown. And Zoe's like, no, you're not seeing it. You don't get it. I want somebody I can take care of in every possible way. Somebody who answers only to me as if I were the hand of God that feeds them. Somebody who would be willing to give up their freedom so that I could command them. I would have access to their email, their bank account, every little thing that makes up a fully formed person. They would belong to me, and in return, I would take care of them the way a mother nurtures a child. They would never work another day in their life unless they wanted to. I would do everything in my power to protect them, to care for them, as long as they willingly gave themselves to me. Um, and then Zoe asks Agnes, are you scared? And Agnes says, no. Um, and, immediately Zoe's like, I understand if you want to keep your distance for a while, if you don't want anything to do with me. That was a lot. And Agnes is like, no, I'll do it. I'm down. I would give myself entirely to you. Once again, it's been a week. It's probably been like 8 days at most. Girl, just because somebody gives you a little $1,000, okay. I see. If it was for a check, you'd do it too. Maybe, I don't know. It's crazy. It is crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, and Zoe's like baffled. She's like, "Are you so serious right now? Like, do you really mean that?" And Agnes is like, yeah. What's up? How do you want to do it? And Zoe keeps double checking that Agnes is sure, and Agnes is absolutely 1000% certain. So then Zoe says, if you're serious, I will draw up a contract. It is that for real. And then, they say, all right, cool, contract. See you later. Talk to you later. And then we get to see what the contract looks like that Zoe has created. And it's basically saying contract agreement between Zoe Cross and Agnes Petrella. Zoe Cross, hereinafter referred to as sponsor, hereby binds this contract with Agnes Petrella, hereinafter referred to as drudge. In this contract of sponsorship, said contract refers to total dominance and control of owner in this relationship with said drudge. In regard to the stipulations contained herein, it is to be noted that the official agreement was reached on the day of June 7th, 2000. This contract is to be a written declaration of this fact. This contract is in no way legally binding in a court of law, but is meant to aid to better understanding of the needs and duties and responsibilities of the sponsor and the drudge. Both the sponsor and drudge agree upon the details of this relationship, with both parties accepting and understanding the consequences of such. And then there's something omitted at the bottom. Don't know what that is. Who's to say? And it's really interesting that it is sponsor and drudge. Drudge is a strange, like a odd use of a name, like of a title, especially considering how Zoe described wanting to take care of someone. You would think it would be a kinder name. At least, like, the way she talks about it, it feels like it should be a kinder title, but it's not. It is drudge, and you can really see later that it is not a kind thing she wants to do.
Also, for reference, a drudge, specifically in its noun form, is someone who is made to do hard, menial, or dull work, which is interesting.
We get more bits of the contract. The purpose of this instrument is to state the full mutual consent of the above mentioned in regards to this relationship, explain the responsibilities and duties of both sponsor and drudge, explain the use of punishment, define all set rules and possible future rules. And then, we see the drudge agrees to obey to the best of her ability to devote herself entirely to the pleasures and desires of the sponsor, agrees to hand over the password to her bank account. The drudge will sleep in the nude with the air conditioning on full blast, even in the winter months. I would hope that you're going to pay for the AC. because that's really expensive. The drudge will only consume food at these specific times. Will confer with the sponsor before making any large purchases. The sponsor accepts full responsibility of drudge, including survival, health, physical well-being, and mental well-being. Which I don't know about that one. Okay. The drudge understands that any infractions of the contract will result in a punishment. This agreement may not be assigned by either party to any third party, so nobody else can come into this. It is just these two. And the agreement may be amended in writing at the sponsor's behest. So if Zoe doesn't like something, she could just change it if she so pleases. And then it tells Agnes how to respond if accepted. And that's exactly what Agnes does. She responds accepted, understood, and agreed to. And then we're in part 3. My God. It is so moved so fast. It is whiplash. Yeah. I don't know how Eric LaRocca packed as much of a punch into such a small amount of time as he did, but my God. Mm-hmm. And now we get another email from Zoe, and she does not acknowledge Agnes as Agnes anymore. She says, "Good morning, drudge." And, you know, saying, like, trust you slept well. I imagine you're getting ready for work. There's another task for you. I'd like you to go into the communal bathroom at work. Leave your undergarments in the stall for someone to find. And she's like, regardless of the pair you choose, I want the undergarment deserted in a conspicuous place where someone can and will find it. And then she ends it with, what have you done today to deserve your eyes? Then email from Agnes says it's done. And then we get another email from Agnes that says she got fired. Shocking. Who would have thought? You can't just be leaving the undies in the bathroom at work.
Also, this is only like 2 or 3 days after the first incident with the dress. Mm-hmm. It's 3 days after. So she has the incident with the dress where she's told to leave early, and then she gets caught leaving the underwear. Someone catches her, like a coworker. And so they basically boot her. And then she says, again, we're back with like the meat stuff. Okay, so she basically says hold on. Okay, sorry. Okay, so she says she didn't feel anything. And then she said, I felt like what an astronaut feels like when they're hurtled toward Earth in a tiny prison chamber. And then she says, it's because the planet is a carnivore and just wants to be fed. People want that as well. People like to eat other people. I spent so many years forgetting I had teeth too. And then she says she packs up her stuff. She goes and gets the underwear from the bathroom. And she says, that's when I thought of you. I know you'll take care of me. You won't eat me, no matter how much you enjoy the way I taste. Which is like, girl, please. What are we doing? What are we doing? Girl, help.
Where are we? Where are we?
Zoe
This is frightening times.
Zoe emails back again using Drudge and sponsor only, basically saying, I'm sad that you got fired, but I was gonna tell you that you don't need to work anymore because I'll take care of you. Um, we can discuss further on Instant Messenger. So, uh, they get back on the messenger, and Agnes is 1 minute and 4 seconds late to getting on. And so Zoe then punishes her, quote unquote, because all of this is happening over chat. Like, they, at this point, have not met in person. And so Zoe tells Agnes to hold her breath for a minute. Um, and then makes her say thank you, sponsor. Um, and then they talk about an allowance, and Zoe is like, I'm gonna deposit $1,500 in your account every month.
Crazy work. What are you, a CEO? Babe.
And then asks Agnes if there's anything that she wants. Agnes says that she wants to see Zoe in person. And Agnes says specifically, I want to know you're real, to feel your blood pumping, the heartbeat in your hands. And Zoe says, like, we can't do that yet, we're not ready. Agnes is say, will we be? Zoe says, someday. Agnes says, you asked me if there's something I want. Yes, more than anything in the world. Tell me. I want a baby. I want life to carry inside me. That's what I wanted more than anything else, to be a mother. You still there? I wish I could give you that. I would if I could. I know you would. I can't stay. You have to leave already? We'll talk tomorrow? Always. So this conversation is like this is like 10 minutes of conversation. Um, so Zoe is like,
Wild time.
Zoe being like, we can't meet in person, I think is interesting. Mind you, we know that the Zoe or Agnes, like, neither of them is faking their identities, because we know at the beginning of this that Zoe Cross is in court currently, presumably for what happens to Agnes. So it's not like Zoe is like hiding who she is or anything like that. So I think it's interesting that she doesn't want to meet in person. Um,
Yeah.
so, and also the baby thing is like, you're gay. Like, I
Girl.
understand like the want, I guess, but you're gay in the 2000s when, like, I feel like that was not
Mm-mm.
even like a
Wasn't as big a
consideration.
possibility.
Yeah. Um
And another email from Zoe.
this is
Yay.
where we're getting into like animal cruelty.
Any animal violence?
Yeah,
This is the
so
time.
Zoe basically says, um tells Agnes to go to a park, and also, okay, Zoe knows where Agnes lives. I don't know if the reverse is true. Whatever. Zoe tells Agnes to go to a park and find a salamander and to put it in her pocket and carry it with her all day, and then at the end of the day to kill it, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and says, you probably didn't know the salamander is a symbol of rebirth in many cultures, a sign of change, transformation, and growth. Don't you wish to be reborn too? After all, what have you done today to deserve your eyes?
And then
Um,
Agnes is like, I would never question your judgment, but I couldn't hurt a living thing. Can you please reconsider and give me another task? And Zoe's like, no, do it. So Agnes, poor Agnes, um, is like, well, all right, I did what you asked me to. I didn't take any pictures of it, so my account of everything will just have to suffice. Um, and she talks about how she went to the park and she's like, what am I doing? I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. But with every barbed thought, I sensed my feet push down harder on the accelerator as if I were gleefully heading towards doom. So she parks her car, goes, finds a little salamander, and she describes finding this little tiny thing as feeling godlike, holding something so itty bitty, so small, something that solely depends on your kindness in your hands. makes you feel like God. But she's like, before I allowed myself to get too carried away with the thought, I put the little creature inside my pocket. I named him Albert. Rest in peace, Albert. You were a real one. And promised I would treat him with crickets if he behaved. He wouldn't know the difference if I didn't, and I knew he wouldn't call me a liar. So she carries little Albert around in her pocket all day. And she keeps looking at her watch, waiting for the end of the day. And she goes back to the park at the end of the day and puts little Albert to bed forever. And then she starts talking about how she never thought that she would be able to do something like that, something so monstrous and wicked. The poor creature didn't deserve to die, and I did it just to please you. What else will I do to make you happy? What else will I do before you finally take my eyes from me, as you've been promising? You and I are better off without each other. And so she's talking about, you will only continue to hurt people through me, and I'll feel bad, and the fuck this. Like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Also, so in this email, right, where she's like ending things, again with the weird like imagery of flesh and like eating and stuff, because she tells a story about this like rabbit at a zoo when she was a child that she used to see, and that she had heard the zookeeper say that the rabbit was pregnant, and so she used to run to the zoo every day after school to see if she had given birth. And then one day she gets there and the rabbit is giving birth, and as she's standing there watching, the mother rabbit eats the baby, right? Which is like something that happens in nature.
Circle of life, crazy
Um
times. Hate to
so
see it.
she says that she eventually asked the zookeeper, or the zookeeper told her that the mother ate both of the babies. He said the baby was sick and wouldn't have survived even if they'd intervened in time. Said this happens all the time in the wild because a carcass will usually draw predators to the den. He said it was probably for the best, just like this decision is for the best. This is where it stops. I'm like, this is such a weird story to tell in this situation. Like, there's a lot of imagery of like eating and devouring and like honestly, they like he could have it's bordering on like cannibalism as an allegory for devotion.
Yeah. Which
And
is interesting considering the next book we have to talk about.
yeah. And I think it's interesting because of something that happens next. This specific part about like the mother rabbit eating the babies, I think is really interesting for her to bring up
Yeah.
during all of this. And then yeah, basically she's like, don't talk to me. I'm sending you your money back. I'm closing my banks and banking elsewhere. Leave me alone.
Yeah. And Zoe's like, damn. I'm really disheartened to hear your decision to void the contract. However, I understand your cause for doing so. I'm truly sorry that I pushed you well beyond your limit. That was never my intention. I think we both wanted different things out of this relationship, and we're coming to the realization that it simply isn't a good fit. I honor your decision, hence voiding the contract. Nothing but good health and prosperity heading your way. I'm always here if you need anything. So, moment, looks like they're done. But then we go to part 4.
So the last email from Zoe is on the 10th of June, and the next email from Agnes is on the 28th of July.
So Miss Ma'am barely lasted a month. Well, 2 months. Barely lasted 2 months. And she's like, the subject line on the email is an apology I owe you. And Agnes is saying, I understand if you don't want to talk to me, considering how I left things. It probably doesn't help that I have the apple peeler pinned to my kitchen wall. And she talks about how much she's been thinking of Zoe. And she talks about how she was contemplating whether or not to just send the apple peeler to Zoe with a note telling you how sorry I am. And so that makes me think then she does know where Zoe lives, which is crazy. The internet in the early 2000s, what a time. No internet safety. Um, and she was like, I would be worried that you would just completely toss it out and not even look at it. Um, you have a right to be mad at me. Um, all of that. And then Agnes just starts apologizing for leaving. I'm like, do you really need to be apologizing, honey? I don't think so. I don't think so. But okay. Um, and she talks about how it was never her intention to hurt Zoe. I don't think I'm better off without you. I should have never said that. Sometimes we say or do things to people we love because we know it will hurt them. So she's now saying that she loves Zoe, which is interesting. Um, Once again, this all started in May. It's July. Okay. Um, Besides, what I had done nearly isn't as horrible as what some other people have done. And then she starts talking about like other things she's seen people do, like
Yeah.
on TV and stuff.
So I'm not gonna go in depth on this part, but basically, violence against children.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, she tells a story about some kid that she had seen on TV who had killed his little brother in like a very gruesome and vaguely religious way. And she like in detail describes what this kid did.
Mm-hmm.
And it like had to do with like crucifixion and stuff, which again I think is interesting given like the nature of their relationship and stuff. And then she says I could never dream of being a monster like that. Neither of us are monsters. Don't we deserve a second chance? And basically is like, please give me another chance. I'll be waiting for your
Mm-hmm.
email. And then Agnes proceeds to send another email like an hour and a half later, and is like, please write back. I'm not better off without you. I wrote you the story about the kid, because I wanted to show you there are worse people in the world. We don't belong in their company. We belong together. I know we do, Agnes. And then we get another email from Zoe, who's like, yeah, great. Let's do this again. I want full obedience and honesty. Blah 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 blah. And then they get on Instant Messenger again. Um, Agnes is on time. They go back and forth. Agnes is saying, "You're the only person in my life who hasn't asked me to leave. When I was little, I thought if people hurt you, it meant they loved you." Which I feel, I feel like that says a lot about how she's ended up in this situation. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she tells a story about her aunt locking her in a closet, um, and she says, I guess that's what makes people do horrible things. They think what they're doing isn't nearly as bad as what somebody else will do. And Zoe says, I would never do anything horrible to you. I know you wouldn't. Everything I've asked of you, I've made you do. It's been from a place of love. Um, I know it has. That's why I came back. Someone else would do far worse things to me. I would never let that happen. We made an arrangement, remember? And then Zoe goes on to say that she dreamt about killing Agnes at one point. Um, Basically, she had a dream where she starts by saying that in this dream that Agnes was mute, and then she realized that she's mute because she ripped her tongue out, which I think is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically it turns into there's like a bunch of stuff in between, like her house explodes, and then she's like in a hospital room, and Agnes is laying in the hospital bed, and she's like all her blood is burned, or all her skin is burned off, um and she's got all these wires in her keeping her alive. And she says, I inch closer to the bed, look at you, and for some reason I savor the moment. I savor the sight of you in pain, your eyes pleading with me to end your suffering. I think to myself, if I were an ice pick, I'd scramble your brain like a plate of eggs. If I were a tomahawk, I'd split you right down the middle like a rotten piece of fruit. I'd do anything I could to erase you, smear you against the world the way a boot wipes off a squished worm on a scraper. You motion for me to lean closer, so I do. You can't speak, but I see your lips moving with muted words, and you mouth the words to me, kill me, you say, over and over again. And basically, instead of doing anything like violent or anything like that, she unplugs her life support. Mind you, this is all a dream. She unplugs her life support, and then the doctors tell her, well, you have to take her place. And she says, I'm healthy, I'm not sick, like, why would I do that? And then she blinks, and now she's in the bed, and her skin is burned off and all this stuff. And she says, only this time there's nobody around to pull the plug for me. Dreams can tell us things. What did that dream tell you? How I would never want to hurt you, which is interesting because I feel like the need to not hurt Agnes in that dream is coming from a place of selfishness, of not having someone to pull the plug for her. And then Zoe says, also, how much I love you. Love? Does that word scare you? No, I like it. It sounds nice. I can't stay on. Early work day tomorrow. You'll email me? Why wouldn't I? Good. I love you, from Agnes. And Zoe says, love you. And then they log off.
And we get another email from Miss Agnes.
Yeah. I've been thinking.
Oh, she's been thinking. She's talking about how I promised myself I would live unapologetically, and damn anybody who finds it offensive. I want us to have a baby. I'm like, girl, it's been 2 months, man. What do you mean? And she says, we love each other, don't we? We belong together. I want to carry your life in me. I, of course, haven't considered the details. We can tell. But all I know is I want to make this happen between us. I need to make it happen. What do you think? And Zoe emails back and is like, I've been thinking about it all day. Of course I love you. Of course I would want to have a child with you, but it's just not possible right now. I don't know if it ever will be. Once again, this is the early 2000s. Think about it. I so desperately wish I could give you what you wanted. I've been thinking of ways we can both get what we want. And I think I've come up with a solution. And this is where things get a little bit more nasty. Not in the freaky way, but like in the actual, oh my god, my stomach hurts.
So
kind of way.
So they get on the chat room, and Zoe basically, we're not gonna get into detail because it's gross, but basically Zoe is like, what is a baby if not a parasite? And Agnes is like, I guess so. And Zoe's like, okay, well, you have to become infected with a parasite and then carry that like it's your child. And Agnes is like, will it hurt? And Zoe's like, yeah, duh. But it'll give you what you wanted. You'll be carrying a life, whatever. And basically then they're like, okay, just think on it and then we'll decide. And basically Zoe instructs Agnes to do things on purpose, to eat things a certain way on purpose, to contract a tapeworm. And Agnes does, and at first she thinks that it doesn't work. She basically just gets really sick. Zoe doesn't hear from her that night, and she sends an email being like, are you okay? Like, I hope you're doing well. Write me back so I know you're okay. And gets another email from Agnes.
Also, in Zoe's email asking, are you okay? It's like, I still can't believe you threw with it. I never thought you would. Ma'am. Okay. What?
So basically, Zoe is upset because it didn't work. She couldn't stop throwing up. Her roommate took her to the hospital, which I think is crazy. She has a roommate. She's doing all of this and she has a roommate. I'm like, okay.
Freaking crazy work.
All right.
Can you imagine living with somebody doing this crazy shit? No.
Roommate is not concerned at all about like the erratic behavior. Okay. And then she tells another story about a cat and a priest. I think
So,
this is another like animal cruelty thing. I don't know.
mm-hmm.
Um and she's
Yeah,
like
it's like
nothing
a
matters.
priest. Yeah, it's a priest being a terrible person, which is that shocking to anyone? Not necessarily. But she's being like, yeah, nothing matters. The answer's
Uh
always been no, that nothing matters.
and this is where like we really see Agnes start to go off the deep end.
We see
Basically
Agnes spiraling.
she basically is like it's finally happening. Like she's really sick again and she thinks that it's because the parasite has taken. And she says, I think it's finally happened. I'm carrying life inside me. It's yours too. Ours. And Zoe is like, I'm so proud of you. You need to consult with your primary care doctor to make sure. And Agnes says, are you happy, my love? Please tell me you are. Mind you, they've kind of dropped the Drudge sponsor thing again. Zoe says, I'm happy if you are. That's all that matters. Which I'm like, okay. Let me know what the doctor says.
I forgot about this. The fucking next email from Agnes, the subject just says, it's a boy. Man.
So she's basically like, the doctor basically tells her that everything came back and that she does have a tapeworm. She refers to it as our child. She says, I know they're technically hermaphrodites with both male and female sex organs, but wouldn't it be nice to think of it as a boy, a son, our little family? We could name him whatever we please. What do you think of the name Phineas? I suppose we have time to think and pick out the most perfect name for our child. It's what I wanted my whole life. I hope you're happy. I'm sure you are. I'll be on instant messenger. Thank you for everything. Thank you for making me a mother. Like, okay. And then they get on the chat room and Agnes is like, I was so happy I sang in public. This is the best I felt in years. The doctor prescribed her medication that she's not going to take. They want to kill our child. I don't even want to go out anymore. I want to be with you and our baby, the three of us. And Zoe is like, okay, but what about when you like pass it? Because like you're going to inevitably do that. Because that's what happens. And Agnes is like, that's not gonna happen. I'm going to carry him forever. That's how it's going to be. And Zoe is like, that's not how this works. It's not how any of this works. And Agnes is like, aren't you happy? There's like, of course I'm happy, but I don't want you to be hurt. Agnes again, I'm keeping it forever. Sometimes I imagine the three of us lying in bed together, your arms wrapped around me, our beloved little worm curled like a cold, wet rope on my stomach. Wouldn't
It's
that be
so.
perfect? Wouldn't that be perfect? Don't you dream of those things too? And Zoe's like, I haven't been dreaming lately. I have to go to bed. We'll
I gotta
talk
go get some sleep.
tomorrow. And Agnes says, you still love me. Yes, I love you too. The both of us do. And then they get off of the instant messenger.
Another email from Zoe, and the subject line says, I'm having second thoughts.
Basically, Zoe is like, I'm afraid none of this gives me any semblance of pleasure. If I'm expecting total honesty from you, then you deserve the same level of honesty from me. Some of the things I've made you do have been rooted in selfishness. Some of them have
You
been
don't
a
say.
result of my whims, placing bets on your endurance and wondering how far you'll go before you break. You've proved me wrong, and I'm afraid much of the hardship was at your expense. I'm not a good person, not as good a person as you are. I'm ashamed to admit it, but you deserve someone who won't pretend to care for you while they are, meanwhile, banking on your misfortune. Because of this, I'm thinking of ending things between us for the foreseeable future. I know you're going to be upset, but this is for the best, and I ask you to trust me. For the first time, I'm thinking of someone other than myself. It scares me, but letting something happen to you scares me even more. The sad truth is, I don't think I love you as much as you love me, and that's okay. That happens in relationships, but I can't take ownership of your destruction. I want this to stop.
And
Uh,
Agnes is pissed.
uh,
Agnes is so mad.
Agnes is like,
Mm,
fuck you, fuck your honesty,
fuck your
uh,
second thoughts. I don't need it. I
calling
need your
her
love.
all kinds of names. I know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to abandon me with our child, the one you wanted as well. It's always going to be ours. Again, talking about this parasite. Um, Zoe
Yeah.
responds and is basically like, you're sick and you need help. Don't reach out to me again. Get help. Don't talk to me anymore. Um, Agnes sends an email saying, I think I did once love you. I think I could have loved you, but not like this. Never like this.
Yeah, and Agnes says, you'll never leave me. You love me too much. You love our child too much. I know you'll respond. You always will. Um, I thought of you last night. I didn't even care how cold it was. Um, and another email. She's begging Zoe to respond. It's been days since we last talked. I want things to go back to how they were. If you'd like me to get help, I'll get it. Anything you say, just please talk to me. More emails from Agnes, continuing to beg. And he did the thing. He says things have gotten worse since we last spoke. Oh, it's the title. But she says, I think there's something wrong. It hurts to even think about, but something's not right with the quote child. And she's like, I don't know if I can bear it anymore. I feel like taking a pair of shears and slicing myself open. Would you come then? Would that get your attention? Another email, please help me. I think something's happening. It feels like a gloved hand trying to push its way through my stomach. Something's going to happen. And then another email from Agnes. It passed, just like you said. Another email. I wish you were here. He's beautiful. He has your eyes and your smile. I hold him in my arms and pretend he makes little cooing noises at me the way all babies do. And the final email from Agnes says, I take the apple peeler from the kitchen and I crawl into the bathroom closet, gently cradling our child. I pretend I can hear the sound of him faintly breathing. The peeler trembles in my hand. I close my eyes, and for a moment, I wonder if I truly deserve them today. And that is the ending of that fucking book.
Yeah.
All of that in 112 pages. My God. Eric
Yeah.
LaRocca, what the fuck are you on, dude?
It's
I gotta be honest. What the fuck?
it is a lot. I do like that we get like this very open ending where it's like, I mean, we know she's dead, right? We know this,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know any more circumstances other than the chat rooms and
Mm-hmm.
like this very ending email, and it's interesting, especially because we also know that Zoe is in court for something regarding her death.
Mm-hmm.
Even though she has, this is how many days after? Hold on. The last email Zoe had sent was 4 days prior to the incident in the bathroom. Um,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is interesting. Like I said, I like how we have no other context. We know Zoe supposedly had an ex-girlfriend that she broke up with around the time that she met Agnes. We know that Agnes has a roommate and is not on good terms with her family. Um, and that's kind of like all the outside information we know. We know Zoe works a job that keeps her busy and pays her well. Um, and we know Agnes had an office job that she got fired from. But we
Mm-hmm.
have no other context for these people. We have Agnes's age, she's 24, but we don't know how old Zoe is. We don't know really where they are. We don't know pretty much anything else about them.
Yep.
And we have no other context for their day-to-day lives other than the emails in the chat rooms. And I think it's really interesting to piece together this like descent of their relationship where it seems like Zoe is a sadist is what it seems like, and she's
Mm-hmm.
kind of getting off to this devotion and seeing how far she can push Agnes and what she can push her to do. And Agnes, who seemingly wants to devote herself to someone in that way, and who very quickly spirals into obsession. And I think it's an interesting flip also from the beginning, where it seems like Zoe is being very love bomby and all this stuff, that quickly spirals into Agnes having this real obsession with her, even after, like, Zoe didn't seem to have really that much issue with Agnes cutting communication the first time. She was just like, yeah, I understand, be on your way, whatever. um Agnes is the one who comes back to her, which I think is interesting. Because, at first glance you can say, like, oh, well, Zoe manipulated her and all of this,
Mm-hmm.
which I think to some degree is true at the beginning, especially. And, like, they should not have been engaging in this kind of relationship, having known each other for such little time, and, like, with the intensity of it. I think they should have been. I think they should have used their heads a little better and considered the, implications of this on their lives. But I don't think that Zoe did anything necessarily to, like, continue manipulating Agnes. Like, Agnes was down to clown seemingly the whole time.
Yeah. I think there was just a lot going on in Agnes's head already. Like, Agnes was ready and willing. She did not give a damn. Um, the only time she ever doubted it was the first time with the salamander. But other than that, she immediately came back and was like, you know what? Actually, I'm fine. I would like to resume. Um, so there clearly was a lot going on, especially when you look at the stories Agnes tells Zoe. There's a lot going on in her head. So I think Zoe played a part, but it was not the main role. Um, and all I can think about at the ending of this book is that poor roommate. Because can you imagine finding your fucking roommate like that?
God. Yeah.
Because it was the roommate who found her,
Yeah.
and that is crazy work. Because if they're like roommates who are like don't really talk that much, they just live together and they don't
Mm-hmm.
really know each other that well. I feel like that would be such a fucking insane thing. Even if
Yeah.
they were very close, but to be like, oh, oh
Oh.
no,
Yeah, and then to like
crazy work.
find out about like the chat rooms and stuff like after the fact, it's all
Mm-hmm.
very like how horrific to the other people in their lives,
Yeah.
especially Agnes, and like interesting that blame is seemingly being placed on Zoe, which makes me curious, like, if is this criminal court, is this Agnes's family going after her, like,
Mm-hmm.
what is what's the vibe, what's going on, why is there a court
Who's doing
case?
it?
Because
What's happening?
there have been other cases where, like, someone has been charged when the other person does that to themselves because of some kind of like blackmail or pressure or something. But that doesn't feel as concrete in this case, so it does make me wonder, like, what is she being charged with? Is this a
Mm-hmm.
criminal case? Is this a civic case? Like, what's going on as far as that goes?
Yeah. There's I This book is such a strange little read. It really is. Um it is so fast, it is so fast paced, it is so strangely written. Like with the chat logs, it's really, interesting to only get those tiny peeks into these people. Um can I say that I enjoyed this book? I'm not entirely certain. I can't necessarily speak. I feel like enjoy is the wrong word to use.
I uh, it is an interesting book and it's an interesting read.
Mm-hmm.
um I'm gonna give my rating. I would give this book like a 3.5, 4. um it's inventive in the way it's written. It's deeply disturbing, which is the point. And
Mm-hmm.
it uses a lot of like imagery and stuff to like evoke that, but it doesn't feel super like shock horror. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like especially since most of it is coming from Agnes, I feel like more so it is this like peek into her psyche and like her weird spiral. Um,
Yeah.
and I like the ending and how like open it is. So I would
Mhm.
give this like a 3.8, I guess.
I think I'll go for a 3.5. That's what I'm thinking. I think it has its pros. It definitely has its pros. But I'm certain they're like, it is so fast. It is so fast. I, to an extent, kind of wish it was just a touch slower and maybe we could see these two like a little bit more together and watch them kind of go round and round and really watch them circle the drain instead of them just getting completely sucked down the drain immediately. Um, but and Eric LaRocca, I like how he writes. I certainly would pick up like more things he's done. I would like to eventually. And for a quick little like disturbing read, if you really want to get freaked out for the spooky month, this will do it for you. So that's my rating upon it. And now the main event, the big show. This is gonna be a long episode, and I hate to tell y'all that, but this is gonna be a long episode. Um, Tender is the Flesh. Agustina, Bazterrica. I love this book. I love this book so bad. This book. I love this book. I love this book. I can't say it enough. It's one of the best books I've read in like 2022, and I was happy to reread it again. Woof. I love this book. It makes you sick. You cannot eat while reading this book, or at least I couldn't. But I love this book. This book is about a world where you can no longer eat animals because the animals there's a virus and all of the animals are toxic to us now. So, no more animals.
Yeah. So
Uh,
they all get a virus and uh basically they so not only is it that you can't eat them, but they die and or the government kills them off.
mhm.
So
Now,
there
what is
is
the government's idea of like, man, we
I mean
need meat, don't we?
it's not even really
How
the
should we do
government's
that?
idea. It just is like the book frames it as like a natural consequence of no longer having access to
Livestock.
meat.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is it comes down to not having access to meat. And I'm using that word specifically for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically, again, it's framed as this like natural consequence to this is that people start eating each other. And it starts off very nasty and like fighting and like eating neighbors and all this stuff. And eventually, basically, it becomes condoned, commodified, and regulated by the government.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not allowed to refer to it as cannibalism. You're not allowed to. There's like a lot of, I, I, I mean, I guess you can, but like you're not supposed to like refer to it in a lot of ways. And so this is where we're at now, right? There's no more animals. People are now eating humans, but these are humans that are specifically bred, genetically modified, um, processed, handled, regulated as if they were livestock. They can't speak. Most of them don't have like the mental faculties to even really take care of themselves. They like rip out their vocal cords and stuff. they treat them like animals.
Mm-hmm.
So our main character is, oh, what is his name? Mateo?
Marcos.
Marcos. Marcos is a man who, prior to everything falling apart, worked in meat processing for his father.
Mhm.
Um, and now works in meat processing, but now is dealing with humans. Um, and he is like the right hand man to someone who owns a very large slaughterhouse.
Mhm.
He, at the very beginning of the book, we pretty much learn that his father is in assisted living because he has dementia. His wife is estranged from him and is living with her mother because they had a baby that passed unexpectedly, and that kind of they kind of fell apart because of it.
Mhm.
And so he's just kind of like living his day to day, and that's kind of the first part of the book, is just seeing what that is for him.
Yeah, it's a lot of like Marcos kind of going through the motions, meeting with people if he has to, and you really see like the kind of dark underbelly of the business side of this kind of like meat processing. You see the business and the corporate and the capitalistic side of it, and it is so, the way Augustina writes this, you forget for a second that these are people. You really do, because it's spoken like it's just like regular business. But then there's a scene where Marcos has to take like a business person, like an investor or like a buyer or something, through a tour of the plant. And so then you see in in the grisly details like what happens in these meat processing plants, and then you remember these are not animals, these are people. And it's crazy, and it's
There's there
interesting how Marcos detaches himself a lot.
Well, okay, so what I think is, first of all, there's a scene in this like kind of like first act section where we're just seeing Marcos go like about his daily life. First of all, from his internal monologue and as the readers, it seems like he doesn't agree with these
Mm-hmm.
practices necessarily. Um, but he needs a job, he needs money. He's good at his job. Um, Despite seemingly not agreeing with the practices, which I think is interesting and comes into play
Mm-hmm.
later. But the
Yeah.
scene that gets me in this like first act is he is at a breeding facility that his slaughterhouse works with, and the man who runs it, who's a white man, they're talking back and forth, and he's also showing, I think he's German, like some guy who wants to
Yeah.
buy head is what they refer to it as. Someone who wants to buy head
Mm-hmm.
from him. Um and as they're going through, they're talking about like the stalls where they keep the pregnant women, and um they oh, how do I phrase this? I'm trying not to get too graphic, but basically they have to do certain things to the women, because if they don't do certain things, then they will try to basically
Hurt
miscarry on
themselves.
purpose.
Yeah.
Which, despite like the whole thing of like, oh well, they don't have, I mean, they don't go to school, they're genetically modified to grow very quickly. How the fuck did the government figure that out? I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
um so like, I don't think they have the same development as like a non genetically modified person, but clearly they still have enough human instinct in them to realize that this is not a situation that they want to have a baby in.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is really interesting, and that scene is like one of those where like you're starting to forget what is happening, and then they get to that scene and it's like, oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Marcos very it seems like he really does not care for this practice, but he detaches himself enough to do his job. Um and there's like other speakings about how the people who cannot afford the meat from like butchers and things like that stand outside of this plant, and they call them the scavengers. Um I think they come into play a little bit later. I might be out of order, but like, there's scavengers who stand and wait outside of the plant and wait for the scraps, like the pieces that don't get used, to be thrown out for them to take and eat. And there's so much like corporate capitalistic kind of like commentary that Augustina does very well. Um and you just kind of watch Marcos just kind of go through the motions. And then eventually Marcos gets gifted something by a buyer or like an investor or somebody involved at the plant.
He's the guy from the breeding center.
Yeah,
The guy from the
he's
breeding
a guy.
center gifts him a quote unquote female
Uh-huh.
who is quote unquote first generation pure, which basically means this was someone who was raised like normally without normally meaning not genetically modified. And he tells the delivery guy, I don't want her. Take her back. And the delivery
Yeah.
guy is like, El Gringo, which is what they call him, will have my job. I can't do that. And he basically just drops, like, she's got like a leash around her neck. He basically just drops it and leaves. And Marcos is like, God damn it.
Well, shit.
And,
Now what the fuck am I supposed to do?
and so he, like, gives her food and water and, like, puts her in his barn or whatever. Um, and then kind of continues to go about his life.
Mm-hmm.
What I am just now realizing, and what I find is very interesting, is Marcos is the main character, and a lot of the book revolves around his relationship with different women. And there is a heavy focus on women, and like the female heads in this book. Um,
Mm,
which I think is very interesting. So he has a sister who he is not close with, and she's kind of not a very nice person. And
no.
she has like two kids. She has twins who are like weird, and like Marcos hates going over there. And she lives in the city, and she kind of is one of those people who just buys into whatever the government is telling her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like we don't even really get to see her husband. We do at one point, but like very briefly. And then obviously his wife, who he is estranged from, and he most of the time talks to his mother-in-law and not to his wife directly.
Yeah. And
He
then
also
there's
has
Spinell,
yes,
who is a butcher.
yes.
She's a butcher. They were having. I mean, is it still technically an affair, like an extramarital affair, if they are
I
not like completely divorced yet?
well, for they're
I
not.
don't know.
They're only estranged, and I think that divorce was never a discussion. At least from what it
Yeah.
sounds like, it's just that she was overwhelmed with grief, and so she went to go stay with her mother-in-law. Um, but I think the first time that they sleep together was before the estrangement.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have slept together prior to the time that we see it in the book.
Yeah.
And
They've been doing this for a while.
it's it's described very strangely, and they do it in the back of her butcher shop, like on a table where she cuts up meat,
Mm-hmm.
and
Like
he
on the cold metal table.
and he talks about how she like holds the meat hooks. She's very like cold, hard
Um,
exterior woman.
yeah, like very almost kind of medical, like in that
Yes.
way. Um, like very clean in that way, and she's like got a real hard exterior, um, but you know, they get down. They do. They get down. Um, and there's a part in like when describing them getting it where um I guess at the end finishing Spinel it says Spinel screams. She screams as if the world didn't exist. She screams as if words had split into and lost all meaning. She screams as if beneath this hell there was another hell, one from which she didn't want to escape. And it's the way, like, now that you mention it, the way the women are described in this book is fucking oof. What is going on?
And it's all like from Marcos's perspective of like how they're being
Mhm.
described. And mind you, this book was written by a woman, so like clearly this
Yeah.
is meant to be commentary not just on like capitalism as a whole, but like the commodification of women specifically.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and like even
Um.
leading up to that scene, like the way he's describing it when they're doing it, he's talking about how like he wants to like break her, and he wants her to like make any kind of expression other than just like this cold exterior. um and it's it's very interesting, and it's one of the first times where you kind of look at Marcos as a protagonist and go ugh, right? Because
Like.
up until this point he's like a fairly sympathetic character. He, you know, is dealing with all this stuff in his life. His estrangement from his wife seemingly isn't his fault. It truly has to do with their child passing. um you know, he's
It's
doing
just
this because
terrible.
it's his job and he needs the money and he needs to take care of his dad and the house and his wife and all this stuff. So he's sympathetic up until that point, and then he continues to be sympathetic after, but that's like
Mhm.
the first moment where you're like something is weird. Something's a little strange
Something's
here.
not right about you. And after his dalliance with Spinel, um, we hear his sister for the first time. She calls him and is like, "Hey, why don't you come over for lunch? I'm making kidneys in a lemon herb marinade. You'll be licking it off your fingers." And he's like, "I'm not eating meat." So you see now he really like he's not going to eat the meat. He's not going to do that. It seems like he does not support this kind of thing. Um, so he goes to his sister's house and we meet her. We see how she is very much like, "Oh, well, the news said this, so why aren't you doing it?" She's that kind of individual where like whatever the government or media tells her, she's going to believe it. Um, and just the way Marcos looks at her feels very um, condescending, like looking down upon, like kind of thing. Which, I mean, these are terrible times. You're probably looking down on a lot of people. Um, but the kids come in, whatever, um, and they are all having dinner, talking, saying hello. We meet the twins. They're weirdos. Um, Very strange. And Marcos, he's like, "I gotta go. I gotta head out. Nice seeing you. See you, sis. Bye." Um, and he heads home. Um, but first, before he heads home, he goes to the abandoned zoo. Um, since animals have basically, in a way, kind of been outlawed in a very
Yeah,
strange way.
pretty much. Like
Um,
either again, I think that a lot of them died out naturally, but I think the government like kills a lot of them.
uh-huh.
Because Marcos talks about he had two dogs, and he says that he put them down himself in like a way that implies that the government would have done it for him if he
Mm-hmm.
hadn't. And he also says that a lot of people took their animals and like horses and dogs and stuff and like took them out into like the wilderness and released them because they didn't have the heart to end their lives.
Yeah.
So I
Um,
think it's a mix of they died off naturally, and also I think it was like a government mandated thing.
mhm. So this zoo is completely abandoned. There's nothing there anymore. He used to go to this zoo like a lot when he was a kid, apparently, and um, in it, looking at this page right now, like as he's walking through the zoo, there's walls covered with graffiti, and someone wrote, "I miss the animals," in small restrained letters, and somebody else crossed those words out and said, "I hope you die for being so dumb," which is so sad. Like the loss of like humanity and empathy is just so sad. Um, but he sees all the cages that are empty and all of that. And he's talking about how it felt, like stuff that happened when his son Leo died, and how his sister only spoke to his wife. She didn't talk to him, and like the coffin, like the funeral itself, and how he felt, and then what happened between him and Cecilia. As he's walking through, he's reminiscing and thinking about all that. And he's seeing, the empty aviaries, a kid's playground that's broken and left abandoned and sad. Um, and as he's walking and walking, and he's thinking and thinking, all that good stuff. He sees all of the the graffiti, um, and on some things people have like written black market, why don't you rip this, meat with a first and last name tastes best, joy small and bright, seriously lol, um after the curfew we can eat you, this world is shit, just like random things people have written. um and then also the funny commentary. Somebody wrote YOLO at one point on like something. And it says, as he's trying to remember what YOLO means. Like, girl, what? Um, but he hears something, and prepare yourselves, Pookies. It's a puppy. It's puppy. It's a dog, and the baby is so sweet. There's multiple of them, like it's multiple puppies, and they're scared because they haven't seen a human, and you know he gets down to their level and like picks him up, and they're so sweet being a puppy, being cute and kissing him and all that. And it says he laughs and cries silently because like this is probably the first time he's seen animals in years. um he names the puppies Jagger, Watts, Richards, and Wood. um and he just watches them play for a while. And this is where we hear him talk about his dogs that he had, and what happened to them. um, he talks about, considering, letting them go free, but he was worried about what would happen to them if he did. Um, so we hear what he had to do to protect them. But at no point has the obvious occurred to him that the puppies have a mother, so he hears a growl. Um, and the mama dog uh, gets at him, tries to absolutely rip him apart because why are you touching her babies? Move. Um, but it's like a bunch of uh, it's like a pack of dogs, like a pack of wild dogs that have been hanging out in the zoo. So he says goodbye to the doggies, um, and he leaves because he doesn't want to get ripped apart. But yeah, he goes home. Um, and he's thinking more about his own dogs. And then he sees that the female is there. She's asleep. He knows he has to wash her, and it can't wait. He should clean the barn. Very much talking about her like she is just livestock. Um, and it seems like he is being fairly sweet. Like he not sweet is an interesting word to use, but he's being kind. Um, washing her. And a lot of this continues to be, his day to day, and he's starting to see her as human. And then he gets a little intimate with Miss Female. He ends up naming her Jasmine, because she smells like jasmine after the soap. Um, and there's a part where it says what he wants to do is prohibited, but he does it anyway. Um, and so, Marcos, man, I don't care for you right now. I gotta be honest. I don't care for this man. Don't care for him. Woof. Um, Another moment we get to see Marcos's character. He's not that great of a guy.
Yeah.
And so he does that. Then we get into Act 2.
I think there's like a little bit of like a time skip where it's like
Like a couple
he
months.
he okay, he I don't remember if it's before or after he gets her pregnant that his father dies. But at some point his father dies and he gets into it with the sister. Like so I guess they don't have funerals anymore because there's concerns about scavengers like breaking into like
The
mortuaries and stuff.
funerals.
So
Yeah.
he's cremated and then they have like a wake essentially, and he basically confronts the sister at the wake and like it's like, you never cared about dad and all this stuff, and finds out that she is keeping a head in her house and is like preparing it in like a really weird messed up way. And so he's
Mm-hmm.
pissed and he basically rages at her, whatever, and then leaves. And basically we find out that she is like 8 months pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
um and he has like taught her how to do certain things on her own so that he can leave her at the house when he goes to work. um and he has like cameras in the house so he can watch her and all this stuff. um and yeah, he's like, there is like a weird implication of a relationship, and I don't know, she's pregnant. He's making it work with his life. um
Yeah.
there's a couple of incidents that happen at the plant. There's one where there's these two guys who want to be hired, and we find out that sometimes people will interview at plants like this just to kind of get their rocks off about seeing the way that the slaughters happen.
Mm-hmm.
um and then we have an incident where there's like a church slash cult, and they
Okay.
do like human sacrifice, but like they pay a pretty penny, so the slaughterhouse like allows it. um
Yeah.
and it's like a whole thing. And they don't actually sell the meat. They don't tell the cult people that, but they don't actually sell it. They give it to the scavengers because of the whole, there's this whole taboo around quote unquote meat with a name.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever. And again, that one also features, well, in the moment what's happening is it's like an older man, but Marcos tells a story about a young woman who was sacrificed that caused issues. So again, we have this like theme of women um being kind of a focal point in the story.
Yeah.
And then I think the thing with the truck happens where a truck gets overturned.
Yeah. Somebody hijacks a truck delivering meat. And that's bad. That's bad. So it's like, it's not the scavengers who do it, it's a group that's trying to stop this. It's like an anarchist group who is against what the fuck ever's going on in the meat processing plants. And so gets overturned, um and completely like destroyed. The meat's fucked up, all that. So like it's a big loss for the company and the plant. And uh wild times we live in. And meanwhile all this is going on, he's trying to prepare the house of like for the baby to come. And he talks about how the house has been full of her wild smell and her bright and silent laughter. Um, he's like prepared a cot and like a crib and things like that. The cameras have been bought so he can like watch her and make sure like she's okay. Um, and then like at the beginning of another chapter, someone asked him, "Have you ever eaten something that's alive?" I haven't. There's a vibration, a subtle and fragile heat that makes a living being particularly delicious. And it's just like, ooh, ooh. The guy who asked him, "Have you ever eaten something alive?" His name is Erlet. Erlet's like drinking wine. Erlet's a strange guy.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like there's also like a hunting. I think that's where that's at, right? There's like a hunting
yeah.
range, like a game reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the way they talk about it is all very like Marcos is like, I need to leave. I need to get out
Yo,
of
I gotta
here.
get up out of here.
And then
I don't want to be here.
again, we see the commodification of women, um, in the sense of like they're talking about like brothels that like allow you to pick a woman to sleep with and then like you could eat her after if you so choose.
Mm-hmm.
Um so again, this focal point on women. Um
Yeah.
and yeah, just very weird. And like I
You
said, the
see
whole time
more.
he's like, I need to go. I need to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. You just continue to see more of how, like, things like hunting, how the whole animal thing has been affected and how they have made it work. Which is wild. And there's like a big window in this office where he's talking to Erlet and he can like see people hunting out in like the yard or whatever the fuck, and he witnesses some of the hunting happen, which is wild. And then the last sentence of that chapter is the game reserve offers hunters a packaging service for their head, which crazy work, wild times. um Erlet sees him out. Goodbye. uh Let me get up the fuck out of here. I don't need to be here any longer. um and I think at this point he comes back around to talking to the guy who ended up gifting him this female, and
Yeah.
he's like, "Hey man, how you doing? It's been forever." And Marcus is just like, "I'm good. What's up?" um but apparently this guy who gifted him this thing is like really high up in the web of corporate guys business stuff, because he's here to like talk to Erlet as well. um and they're doing the thing of like smoking cigars in big leather armchairs, acting like they run the world kind of thing. um and uh the guy who gifted Marcos the female asks, "How was she?" and like assumes that Marcos has eaten her, which is not the case. Um, and we end up seeing like another guy from the beginning of the book, the German dude. He's also there. It's a bunch of them having a meal together, and you can imagine meat. Yeah, crazy. Um, it's um they talk about there's a chef named Ulysses Fox.
Mm-hmm.
Um and uh or I don't know if he's a chef or who he is, but I believe they are eating Ulysses Fox. Um Based on what I'm seeing.
Oh,
Oh,
he
there's
was,
also a slur in here.
he was a musician that
Yeah.
was like down on his luck or something, and like they make a big show out of eating specific body parts, and it's like a whole
Mm-hmm.
thing. and one of them calls the other a slur for eating said specific body part. And again, the
Mm-hmm.
whole time Marcos is like, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. Um,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
like,
the Ulysses box was hunted. That's what it was.
yes, he was a musician. And there was like a whole thing of like, there's also tension, I guess, because for some reason the plant that Marcos works for stopped working with someone who was there or something. So there's like weird tension. The whole thing is weird. That whole interaction is very strange, and Marcos fucking hightails it out of there as soon as he can.
Mm-hmm. All he says, he's thinking of Jasmine. So he wants to leave. And when he gets the fuck out of Dodge, he passes by the zoo again. And basically, like the place he walks through it again. And he hears shouts and laughter and animal violence. The puppies the puppies are not there anymore.
Yeah, there's a bunch of teenage boys. They're being teenage boys,
They're
and
being fucked up, weird teenage boys.
um, Marcos doesn't intervene because there's like 4 boys or something, and like there's only one of him, and whatever. They end up killing the puppies, and it's like a whole thing.
Yeah, it's really sad. It's a very sad scene to witness.
Yeah.
But then we get another scene like talking about like an inspector will come from the office of Undersecretary for the Control of Domestic Head. And he's inspecting like the plant to make sure everything's running okay and making sure they're like following the rules and all of that. And basically, Marcos takes this inspector to the barn where Jasmine is, and he says she was a gift and I'm still getting used to her being here, but she's been vaccinated. I'll get the papers for you. The inspector says you could always sell her. She's an FGP. She's worth a fortune. I have a list of interested buyers. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I don't see anything out of the ordinary. My only suggestion is to clean her up a little to prevent disease. Remember that if you decide to slaughter her, you'll need to contact a specialist. The same goes for selling her, or if she escapes, you have to notify us.
It's a lot of like
So we don't
red
have any
tape.
issues.
It's a lot of like
Yeah.
red tape stuff back and forth between them. And then we find out that Marcos, at one point early on into the government, like condoning all of this, that he worked as an inspector that was like helping set up these regulations and these laws. And he ends up, the guy that he had been partnered with at the time, he quit because of he wasn't making enough money. And that I think that was around the time, I think that's when his father went into the nursing home. But anyway, he quit because he wasn't making enough money. But the guy he was partnered with goes on to become like a very high up person in the kind of government side of all of this. And so the he calls him he calls him El Gordo, which is fat in Spanish. Um, and he gets a call from him and he's like, you didn't tell me you had a domestic head, blah blah blah, basically saying next time an inspector comes out, just sign the forms, don't even worry about it. So this whole time Marcos has been just doing that. I don't know how often they come out, but like I think it's happened once or twice since the first time, and he's just signed the paper and they leave. And obviously now he's keeping Jasmine in the house, for one, and for two, she's pregnant, and if anyone finds out, he's gonna get killed. This It's like the highest rule that you can break. So one
Yeah.
day, an inspector shows up at his door who is very adamant about actually seeing her and all of this stuff. And I think his friend got transferred, or he got like a promotion. So he basically buys his time with this kid until he can get his friend on the phone. And he basically puts the friend on the phone with this young inspector. And he's like, don't make him, like, just have him sign the forms and go. And like you can tell that this kid is like upset about that, and like realizes there's corruption going on. So we've got capitalism, the commodification of people's bodies, especially women, and now you've got like corrupt government aspect of this.
Mm-hmm.
and the guy leaves, and it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, and there's a part, the last line of that chapter when the guy leaves is he never would have imagined he'd break the very law he established, which I love that line. That's a tasty line. And then, when the inspector leaves, he immediately goes to Jasmine and unties her and just hugs her and just holds her and touches her face very gently. And, she doesn't understand because she doesn't have the capacity to understand. He's got the day off the next day. He's listening to jazz. He's minding his business. And that's when, this is about when dad dies. He gets a call from the nursing home where his father is, and it's dad. He's on his way out. You know, it happens a lot later in the book than I thought. But also, it's very interesting how on the nursing home somebody has sprayed graffiti. And like it's weird about like the nursing home and things like that. Like it's really not respected. But the lady working at there says, your dad died in his sleep. And Marco's cries because it's his dad. Sad times. And that's when Marcos kind of becomes a bit of an asshole. Even like the worker at this nursing home is a woman. He becomes a bit of an asshole, like speaking to her when she's just trying to help. And he's getting annoyed that his sister wants a service. And he doesn't want to make his dad have to go through that. That kind of stuff. And Marcus just really is not in a very positive light right now. But he cremates his father. And basically what he does is he goes and he spreads his father's ashes somewhere else. Somewhere like where he had good memories with his dad. He spreads his ashes there, and then after spreading his ashes, fills the urn with dirt, and that's what he takes to his sister. And I'm like, dude, I know you don't like your sister, but damn, King, crazy. But yeah, it's sad. I believe I want to say he takes the ashes to the zoo, and that's where he spreads his father's ashes because he went there as a child with his dad a lot. Yeah, he went to the zoo. And he spreads his ashes there, and at the end of that chapter, it says, this is what his sister's going to get, an urn full of dirty sand from an abandoned zoo with no name. So then takes the urn to his sister.
They get into a public bat.
Yeah, they get into a big public fight. It's a mess.
He leaves.
My God. He leaves. He gets home. Jasmine's asleep. Yeah. Just it's starting to spiral out. He is absolutely, I think, losing his empathy and things like that. Like the way he treats his sister, you can really see him starting to lose it. But yeah, it continues. More things happen at the plant, and he goes back to work. The fucking German guys calling him, and he's pulling the, hey man, I heard your dad died. Sorry. Hate to tell you, you don't have to go into the laboratory or anything. If you need time off, just, hang out. Mourn your father. But he eventually has to go to this laboratory because it's like one of the highest paying clients of this meatpacking plant. And yeah, but Marco said, you're not understanding me. I'm not going. Fuck you. Not happening. ooh, and then they start talking about what her name is, like Dr. Valk or Valka. Dr. Valka, who is a woman, again, a lot of women. Um and the things she's doing in this library or in this laboratory, and the things she's practicing and experimenting, and like I assume this is how they figured out how to genetically modify the heads and things like that, is like for women like her. um that kind of stuff. Apparently a specimen attacked her one time and
Mm-hmm.
bit through her leg.
Yeah.
Crazy. um
And
and
again,
she's
it's
just,
a lot of it again is Marcos being like, I don't like this. I don't care for this. I'm only here because it's my job.
yeah, I'm only here because I have to be. And he's just watching this woman like talk about how incredible and like the scientific strides they're making and how exciting it is. And he's just like, uh huh, okay, can I leave yet? So off he goes. And he does not want to be there anymore. And then his wife calls, this girl. Um, and she says, I heard about your dad. Are you okay? Do you want some company? Are you guys having a service? What's up? um and then she says she misses him. And she's like, you look different. But he says, I am the same. um and they just talk for a second. It's really small talk. You can tell there's a lot of tension between the two. They don't really know how to speak with each other anymore. And you can really feel the cracks of their relationship and how vast they are. But when he gets home, he hugs Jasmine after speaking to his estranged wife. Wild.
Yeah.
um but his sister's calling, trying to organize the service, and he's not fucking answering. He's like, bitch, shut up. um and then it's time for the service, and he's like, why am I here? What am I doing? I don't want to be here. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna leave because no. And that's when he finds out about the domesticated head that his sister is keeping, and
Mm-hmm.
how the head looks at him sadly. um and he's like, what's your fucking problem? You disgust me, lady. And he makes a comment about how she's incapable of thinking for herself. You never cared about dad. Blah blah blah. You know, drama. Um, and is it about this time? We are almost at the birth. We're almost there. This is where the truck gets overturned. It's a mess. They don't really know what to do. Wild work. They've attacked us. Oh my god. And Marcus is like, what the fuck do you want me to do? I don't know.
I think they
But he
figure out
goes
like some
home.
plan on what to do going forward, and then he goes home.
Yeah. Yeah, he goes home, and Jasmine is in fact giving birth. Um, so he calls his wife, who is a nurse. So that's another reason why he calls her, is because she's a nurse, and she's probably the only one who could help him without him getting absolutely obliterated. And so wifey comes over, and she helps Jasmine give birth. Um, and the wife's like, dude, what the fuck? How'd you get here? What? Pregnant? Why? What? But she helps. And the baby is born. And this is the ending of the book. But once the baby is born, um, the child, the wife Cecilia takes the baby. It's a boy, which they had before. And Cecilia's like, he's beautiful, he's perfect. Um, and Cecilia's like, well, get some towels and water to clean her up before you take her out to the barn. Talking about Jasmine. And Marcos says to the baby, like says to his wife and the baby, he's ours now. And Jasmine is trying to reach for her child until Marcos, kisses her on her forehead and clubs her in the back of the head and kills her.
Yep. And then that's the end of the book.
That's the end of the book. Cecilia watches Jasmine fall to the floor, and she asks, "Why did you do that? She could have given us more children."
Yeah.
And Marcos said she had the human look of a domesticated animal. And that is the last line of the book. This book was fucking insane to read the first time.
Yeah.
It was fucking bonkers to read the first time. That ending left me sat in silence for like 15 minutes. This book is so stunningly written for the horrific content that is inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it has really beautiful commentary. Agustina, the woman that you are, it's so well thought out, and it is so gut punching. I genuinely considered like changing my dietary habits after this, like really thinking about like what happens to have the food we do. I genuinely considered it for a long time after reading this book. And I feel like that is a sign of incredible writing on Agustina's part. She really, really, really hit home on this kind of topic and the concepts inside of it and the commentary she wanted to make. I think she did an incredible job. This is one of my favorite books I read, like, ever. I love this book. Love it bad. Love it, love it. And her writing style is just gorgeous. I think she has a very beautiful writing style. And I cannot wait to read other things she's done. She has a book coming soon that I'm really excited for. But it's such a good book. It's a very, very good book. If you can handle this kind of content, I would recommend this book to everyone who could handle it. This is not for everyone. It's not for everyone, but I would recommend it to anybody who could. So a rating wise, this is like a 4.5 out of 5. It is very nearly a 5. I almost do want to give it a 5. I don't know what's keeping me from it, but it's a gorgeous book. It's, for as horrid as it is and like horrific and disturbing and sad, it is a gorgeously well written book with incredible topics discussed, to make you look at it in a different light, and really good critiquing of how our world works and the systems that have been set up. It's a great book. So I give it like nearly a 5.
I would probably also give it a 4.5. It is super well written. It tackles issues of our own society in a way that is unique and from a different angle. That is something that really makes you think, especially about like the commodification of the human body, and especially with the focus on women. I think Marcos is a really interesting protagonist who, up until the end, you think like, yeah, he has a couple of moments where you're like, but like for the most part, you think he's a good guy who really doesn't agree with the system until the system works in his favor. And seemingly the same goes for his wife, where, I feel like that's a good commentary on how women treat each other and how, you might be against, because when she first shows up, she's kind of up in arms about the fact that Marcos has done this, and then at the end, when she realizes that this benefits her, she's suddenly okay with it, and it was like, why did you kill her? So
when she could have done more.
Right. So I think it's very wonderfully written. I read the audiobook, or I listened to the audiobook for the second time, because I actually read it the first time. And it was really interesting to hear everything spoken and kind of like the inflection and the tone of stuff. I recommend it. It's on Spotify. So it's an interesting way to consume it, a second time. But yeah, it is very wonderfully written. It's not too long. It's full of things that will make you think. It's a very thought-provoking book, even aside from some of the imagery that it uses. And I don't think it goes over the top with that imagery either. It is not nearly as visceral as Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last spoke. But it is still like stomach churning enough that you have to like really sit and think about the actions of the characters and how those reflect on our real lives.
Yeah. She doesn't take it overboard with like the really like horrific, descriptions. I think she has balanced it perfectly to like get to you bad, but not take it to like an egregious level.
Yeah.
But fucking, I love this book. This is a sick ass book. Love it. So that is our Halloween double feature. This is a long one. I apologize to you for listening, and also to Ether. You have to edit this, and I'm so sorry. But we didn't go classic spooky. We wanted to be a little different. We wanted to be a little unique.
We're skipping November. So we'll have
so you will see us again in December for the Christmas times.
Do something holiday themed. Who knows?
We'll do something a little festive, a little fun. We'll see.
Yeah.
So we will see you then. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Bye.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Bye.
Goodbye.